Fighter 5.
So we've made it here, the end of all things. Street Fighter 5. And I know a lot of people are going to be concerned because we missed the EX games. We didn't do the Street Fighter the movie games. Trust me, I would have loved to. A lot happened this week and stuff happened a bit faster than I was expecting. My daughter got sick, so I'm sorry. We have to stick to mainline Street Fighters for the most part. So let's talk about the big game, the big final game, which is Street Fighter 5. And I almost feel like the story of SF5 is one of the most interesting, because while Street Fighter 5 is a story for a lot of people of disappointment, it's a story of expectations essentially being completely distraught and an honor system between Capcom and its audience being broken. I personally see Street Fighter V as an absolute redemption arc, and it is a true redemption fighting game that took something that was possibly in its worst possible state, you can put it, and then bring it back to something great. But it took some time. It took so long that we have to go back to the very start, pre-release Street Fighter V, the betas, and the first E3 presentation. I think this was a fun game, right? I think SF5 at the beginning, pre-release, in those early betas, is actually really enjoyable. It's obvious that things are easier to do. It's definitely different than Street Fighter 4, which is fun. I get some criticism for this, but I still think I think I stand by this. I think from 10 feet away, Street Fighter 5 can look a lot like Street Fighter 4. And 10 feet away, you start to get the casual eyes, right? You get the eyes of the people that just buy a fighting game for the sake of buying it, and they just want that new Street Fighter, and they need to see something new in that next Street Fighter that entices them to buy the next game. And to me, I don't really see the differences enough so that those players will have a justifiable reason to buy a new Street Fighter over their 40-plus character roster Ultra Street Fighter 4 or whatever. My early impressions at E3 are pretty decent, because I do think the game visually looks nice, but I think it looks very safe. It looks very Street Fighter 4-y, but obviously higher fidelity and obviously better, and I think the art style is better. But there's something about the way it plays at E3 that I'm not like a huge fan of. My overall impression at the end is that it? Because it didn't seem like there was a lot of sauce. It felt like the game was relatively barren mechanically. All they were really doing was mixing and mashing character tools that they had in the past and putting them behind locked parameters. Like, this character used to do this, now it's their V trigger. This character used to do this, well, now it's their V skill. Things like that. And then some characters were retooled in ways where they just had completely different, things, which was fun and interesting to a certain degree. So the betas happen, and we start figuring out some stuff in the betas, and it is kind of cool. Like, some of the combos are sort of neat. There's some very enjoyable stuff. As the betas go along, though, I get worried, because a lot of the fun stuff that we would find gets progressively taken away, and then you find something else cool and it gets taken away, and then you find something else kind of cool and it gets taken away. To the point where we're like 3 or 4 betas into this friggin' game, and I just didn't even want to play it. I was just so distraught. By the time the February 2016 came out, I did not play much Street Fighter 5 at all in that first week or so. I really didn't. It kind of felt like the fun got removed from the game in many ways. This was like a big stigma that would stick with me for a very long time outside of even the rough contentless launch that was SF5, is this feeling that, like, no fun allowed. No fun for you, no fun allowed. We're gonna take this away, we're gonna take that away. It's like, geez, man, okay, I guess. And now I just remember doing all these really cool things with the characters, and no, this is not there anymore. So that's my first impression of Street Fighter V, even technically pre-release. So the game comes out, and we get some review copies, and we're checking it out. V-Trigger seems like a cool enough thing, even though it's like a really diet instinct mode from KI. And the game's also doing something kind of interesting in terms of its release schedule. They are making characters free, but they cost in-game currency that doesn't technically cost money. They're technically free, but you can do things in the game to earn this currency. So there's a little bit of goodwill there where you don't have to buy a super SF5 to an ultra SF5 or anything like that. They're trying to stay away from that. This is just the beginning of a lot of expectations that players would have for SF5 that Capcom seems to promise, and then they just can't deliver on. And then by the time the game comes out, I got my review copy, and no joke, man, I couldn't believe it. This is pre-story mode. So the story mode is promised, but it's on the horizon. It's in the future. So we get this really barren game where the characters can't do a lot of stuff. The roster is relatively small, smaller than Street Fighter 4 at launch, and there's not even an arcade mode. There's not even a way to fight versus matches, technically. Like, all you get is a survival mode to unlock colors for the characters. And this is it. So the game launches, and it's had a ton of technical problems throughout previous betas. It launches, there's almost no offline content outside of like training mode. And if you wanted to go online, it also wasn't working really. Like, it was constantly crashing, right? That sound. It was constantly crashing and things were freaking out and you really couldn't play much. So in the first like day and a half of the game being out, people spent $60 on a brand new fighting game, dude, that you almost could do nothing with outside of just train to fight each other or do single player survival mode. So people were furious. This is the beginning where Capcom starts to lose its audience. This bad word of mouth was not unprecedented. This technically carried over from a previous experience that we have not fully talked about, which is the launch of Street Fighter Cross Tekken. So Capcom had already been generating a decent amount of ire from its fan base and people that like fighting games that maybe aren't super hardcore, that, you know, need a reason to buy a new game, which also generated a bunch of ill will from its fan base from Marvel vs. Capcom 3, with its update happening not that long after that you had to pay $40 for. As we get to SF5 in 2016, people are already kind of like, the ground has already been kind of soiled in many ways, and it's going under your feet. It's starting to sink a little bit. So SF5 comes out. It's a relative disaster. I have never heard so much shit talked about a fighting game ever in my life. It is crazy. We later find out that the game had to launch. That SF5, if it did not launch in the period it did and the time frame, Capcom might not have survived. Like some crazy financial thing that they really needed to launch the game in the time they did. So the game launched with barely any content. It was forced to launch. The DLC characters came along a bit sooner after that, but we finally got the thing that everybody was, you know, kind of excited about: a cinematic story mode, a brand new free cinematic story mode that would be downloadable in, I think, July of the same year. So this is like 4 or 5 months later. We finally get a cinematic story mode. Maybe people are going to like the game this time. Maybe people are going to find something to attach to. It's absolutely dreadful. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is not normal. Holy shit. Really? Really? They're like superheroes now? They jump without shoots? Oh my god, calm your hair, lady. We played through it again recently. I played through it again that last year when we were talking about Street Fighter 6. And the one thing that story mode is good for, because the story is terrible.
You must have found a girlfriend!
No, I didn't. Don't touch me. Hey.
Look at, they have to frame the shot because of how ridiculous this would be. What is this? What in the fuck?
A typical brother-sister relationship.
Just because you find it awkward in-game doesn't mean it isn't hella weird.
Unfortunately, you're a little...
I feel like my brain is going numb. The matches are uninteresting outside of, you do get to fight some weird characters, which I do think is kind of interesting, but it is essentially a boring version of MK9/MKX's story mode. Ugh. But in that story mode, they give you playable versions of future DLC characters. So you can play as the highly anticipated Jury, and you can play as the highly anticipated Urian, characters that are on the horizon to eventually launch, right? But that also pisses people off a lot, because you got these characters that appear to be nearly done, and you can't freaking play them. It's not a good spot for Street Fighter V at the launch. I'm not even talking about the Root Kit. I'm not even talking about the wide variety of other crazy stuff that I've probably forgotten about. But there's just so many things in that first year that are not great for SF5 that set it on a path of just like destruction, that I don't know how they get themselves out of this, but they do. So season 2 of Street Fighter happens. I'd say competitively at this time frame, Street Fighter 5 is actually doing just fine. I remember it having a good show at Evo. That was the famous like L.I. Joe Evo, where he makes it into top 8, and there's like a nice little hero story. I remember being pretty excited about that. And Street Fighter 5 at this point has the most entrants of any game in Evo ever. From what I remember, 2016, Evo had like 5,000, like nearly 5,000 100,000 people, which is insane. I think that beats any other fighting game that Evo's ever had by a ton. So what becomes clear at this point is there is a big separating difference between competitive fighting game players and all of the insane aggression and people that felt burned by the game that weren't planning on playing it competitively. This taught me a lot about the Street Fighter community in general, where you really need this to be cleared up, and it will take a lot of time for Capcom to eventually get people on their side. Because Street Fighter V competitively is doing just fine. Any of the tournament showings is going okay. The viewership's relatively okay. But over time, it feels like it's getting a bit stale, right? It feels like we're seeing a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again, because we are. Because the characters don't play that much different from one another in the very early versions of SF5. So Season 2 kind of goes through, and Urien is really cool, right? And Jury, a lot of people are having a lot of fun with, and some of these characters are really great. I don't feel like SF5 really starts to get some hope instilled until you start to get to around Season 3. In Season 3, I think the big moment for me was when Sagat and G came along. Even when Akuma showed up with, like, technically Arcade Edition, I think is what it was, there were some signs there that, like, okay, it's starting to get a little bit better. People are starting to like this a little bit more. But Akuma was weird looking too, so that also did not go over super well. It looked like a big flower. Season 3 is where I feel like it starts to change. So you get some crazy characters, right? And you get some truly creative stuff. Sagat's an interesting one because stuff has been mixed around on him, and it almost felt like we can't make him too good because he's been too good in too many things. But there's a few characters that are genuinely, like, really cool. And as much as I'm not like a big, like, Abigail fan, he's a crazy idea. Abigail just sort of solidifies already so many pre-existing feelings of Street Fighter V into just being super shitty all over again, regardless of how he plays. But Minot, she's incredibly cool looking, man. Incredibly cool looking. Cody's redesign is such a great idea. I don't love the way Cody plays or the way he looks, but man, that making him the mayor was such a cool idea. And Minot, I truly feel, is one of the best animated fighting game characters ever. And this is where we start to notice that some parts of Street Fighter V look really good. Look like some of the most premium shit in this entire industry. Some of the greatest character animations in this whole industry, in the form of, like, Minot and Zeku, right? Characters are just awesome looking. And then there's other parts of it that just don't look good. You get, like, Abigail, you get some of Cody's animations and stuff and the way he moves, and it's just like, what is going on? There's some weird disparity going on between some of the visual elements of the game, which is just an odd thing. And it's not that that's different than Street Fighter 4. Some characters in Street Fighter 4 look a lot better than others. It just becomes very obvious in SF5 that, like, something's going on. Time goes on, and we eventually reach the finality of what we seem is Street Fighter V in Season 4. I think at some point, I am just playing the game to check out new characters to sort of see what they're like. I really don't have any invested feelings in terms of like getting better at the game. I remember reaching platinum with Ken in the first couple months the game was out, or first few months the game was out, or something like that. It was around the launch time frame, and that was the highest rank at the time. But after that, after I reached the rank I wanted to, we hit platinum, and I was like, I'm done.
Let's fucking go! Did we do it? In 4 days! We are platinum! Yes! Did we do it? Yes!
I think I'm done. I think I'm done. I was comically done with ranked. So I had already sort of set myself in a path that I was just going to play other things, and we'll just check Street Fighter V out to see how it goes. Later on, they would actually bring me back. I really like Season 4 of Street Fighter V. To a degree. Kage happens, right? We get Kage, we get Poison, we get Honda, we get the, oh god, I forgot her name, the Final Fight girl. I always forget her name. Cup of Coffee, we get Gil, and we get Seth. Lucia, thank you. Some of these characters are pretty interesting. I feel like a lot of people were pretty happy with the way that, like, Honda and Poison came out. Kage is definitely a weird one, where it's like, we're just gonna make evil Ryu, but make him weird and give him horns. Funny enough, I really don't like Kage very much in terms of their approach on the evil Ryu character. But Lucy has a really cool idea. You know, they're crossing over even more with the Final Fight isms of the series. But it's clear this is the end of Street Fighter V. It's clear because They're giving us boss characters here at the end of all things in Season 4. The final characters that were added to Street Fighter V was finally the addition of Gil. Gil was a teased character throughout all of the story mode, pretty much talked about, referenced, and teased at the very last shot of the game. And then we finally got him, right? Oh god, Gil is finally playable. And then we also get Seth, another returning boss from Street Fighter 4, but completely mixed around. And now the character is like a female, but can also be a male, and is all this crazy stuff. And they're amazing. They are so much fun. Like, I couldn't believe how much fun they were, to the point where my perspective of these characters in Street Fighter being like boiled down versions of their previous selves, I have such a good time playing as Seth, right? I think I had some of the most fun in Street Fighter V with Seth at launch when that character came out. Just ridiculously cool character and so many interesting things. If she was one of the last characters, she can literally suck the powers out of you and use that power, right? So it was like, oh, okay, so she's the last character because she can suck the powers out of all the other characters that have come before, and, you know, there's no other characters in the future. That makes a lot of sense. She's like Kirby, right? And Gil was just amazing. This like polar ice and fire thing where he can explode the ice and manipulate the fire by using the alter element, and you have to figure out which pose or which version you're manipulating. Oh my god, dude, I'm like, this is interesting as shit. Holy hell, these characters are awesome. What is going on here? So I feel like at the end of Street Fighter IV, I'm actually feeling pretty great. I am enjoying the time I'm playing with Street Fighter V. And I feel like it took them a while to sort of figure out what's possible with the game and what they can get away with. And they know that people are kind of burned that characters felt bare bones. People are kind of burned that everything in the game got kind of homogenous at certain points. So as the game goes along, that does change, which is fun. Season 4 gets a lot of credit for me. And it truly felt like it was the end of Street Fighter V. And we were just going to wait for the next Street Fighter. But that wasn't it. It would be like, my god, man, I can't remember how much time passes, because there usually isn't a lot of time in between characters in Street Fighter V, right? There usually is, like, even between seasons, there's not that much time. So a lot of time passes, like way more than usual, and we all think it's done. And then suddenly there's an announcement that they're not done. There's actually a Season 5. We're like, dude, the last character was the bosses. We know that was the end. What the hell happened? And yeah, there was already some rumors from internal sources and things we were hearing around that time frame, around like 2019, 2020, that Street Fighter 6 was going through some development woes, and they were having to they had to delay the game. From what I recall, there were some early rumors that Street Fighter 6 might have been like a launch game or something like that on PlayStation 5, which would have made a lot of sense. That would have lined up like a year after SF5, you get, you know, Street Fighter 6. But that didn't take place. And in the same time frame, there's a dramatic management shift at Capcom Fighting Games, the likes of which hadn't been seen for like over 10 years. So something is clearly going on, and now this new team, or it isn't new, it's the same people that have been making Street Fighter V. These guys are left with a new season of SF5, as we're clearly waiting for the next Street Fighter, and we are waiting to see what the hell they have planned for a 5th season. Like, Jesus, we're gonna still be playing Street Fighter V? We're gonna still be watching Street Fighter V? This is crazy, man. And it's incredible. I literally make a Dan Legacy as like a joke.
My dad could beat you, and he's dead?
What? I literally make a Dan Legacy because so much of SF5 is so esports focused in its entire existence. So much of it is hyper fixated on, we want to turn you into a competitive player, and we want to bring you to the top, and you go to Capcom Cup, and right, so much of it is being that. And I'm just like, dude, if they wanted to change people's minds on this game, they need to put in a character that will not do good competitively and will just be fun, right? Just put in some character that people like and will be fun, like Dan. Why the hell is Dan not in Street Fighter after all these friggin' years? Like 4 years later, where the hell's Dan? I'm doing a Dan Legacy. I'm pissed off. We do our Dan Legacy, a week fucking later, Dan's announced.
The new character is a Marvel vs. Capcom collection.
最強流の使い手ダンになります。
I didn't.
ダンを選んだ理由など
I didn't. Everyone's gonna think, did I literally will this bitch into existence? Oh my god!
I didn't have any input on that. That shit had been in development for a long time. However, the stuff that I was complaining about in the Dan Legacy, that why don't they treat this like a normal game and not just an esport? Why don't they add the characters that people might want to jump back into Street Fighter and play instead of just becoming esports players? They got the memo at some point because they revealed that Dan's going to be the next character. And immediately this event has a huge impact on, I feel, just Street Fighter V in general and me, where it's like, oh shit, are we really on the course for something interesting here? Wait a minute, did this, are they actually making some good decisions here? And it seems like they are, because in Season 5 of Street Fighter V, they also reveal in the same stream that another fan favorite character was going to be making a return. And Oro was really cool. Oro's an interesting take, right? Rose was also like, okay. No, I don't feel like a lot of people were super excited about Rose. However, there was already rival schools characters littered throughout certain parts of Street Fighter V. And even going back to 2016 when those things started popping up, we were asking ourselves, oh man, are we going to get like Final Fight characters as well as rival schools characters? That would be really cool. That seemed like there was a huge demand for that stuff, but nothing ever happened. So Season 5 happens and they announce Akira from rival schools is going to be a character. Okay, character exists in the same Street Fighter universe, so this is the crossover character. What the fuck? What the fuck? No fucking way! Holy, what the fuck? This is fucking nuts! Why is Akira important? Akira is important because of what happens 10 years before. 10 years before, Capcom is about to release a game called Marvel vs. Capcom 3. On Capcom's website, which does not exist anymore, Capcom Unity, they are directly engaging with community members. Which characters can we add to Marvel vs. Capcom 3 that you'd be happy for? And at the top of the list of Capcom characters is no shit Akira from Rival Schools. She was one of the most requested characters to be in a Capcom fighting game 10 years ago. It was clear that whoever is the tenure at Street Fighter now was paying attention to that shit, because she's actually real and she is a playable character in Street Fighter V, and she's fucking awesome. All these characters come out, right? And they're actually all super cool. Don't get me wrong. Dan is incredible. I think Dan is one of the smartest characters. Like, I can't even believe how fun he is, how stupid fun he is, and how in character he is. They literally buffed this guy, but nerfed him at the same time. It's perfect. Everything about Dan is actually amazing. And he's also super fun. Rose is also crazy interesting. Completely different character than what she was in Street Fighter 4 in the alphas, which is kind of a stale-bred gameplay sort of character. They do all these crazy V-trigger card mechanics and all this wild stuff. She's genuinely interesting. And then Oro is like the combo god of the game, right? He sets up for his Ouroboros. I'm gonna put some nutsacks, balls, and SNESs around me, and I'm gonna combo the shit out of you, right? Oro is genuinely super interesting. And Akira uses her brother in combat and shit, and has insane air combos. Like, what is this game? This is not the same Street Fighter V we've been playing. This is a very different game. And then we get a hint of the future of Street Fighter. And I really thought we were going to go to something like a KOF character, a guest character from another fighting game. And we did get a guest character from another fighting game, but we got Luke. And this was our first tease of the future of Street Fighter. And Luke plays insane. Luke plays like he comes from a different game. He truly does, because he's wiping the floor with every other character in the game. And he gets nerfed like 3 times or some shit, and he's still incredible. A lot of people got different feelings on Luke, in SF5, because he's a much different character in Street Fighter 6. But easily is different. Right? What they're giving him in the game is something that other characters haven't really had before, which is exciting about the future of Street Fighter and where Street Fighter 6 is going to lead us. So Street Fighter V is so interesting to me, man. It ends up being an absolutely amazing Capcom fighting game. It really is. The netcode issues that it had throughout its entire existence never go away, though. And we later learned that the persons or group responsible for making the netcode in SF5, its rollback netcode, made a lot of really bad decisions at like a core fundamental level where they can't be fixed. So that has to be acknowledged, right? That the game had net play issues throughout its entire existence. So there was a lot of expectations from fans, right? A lot of expectations, and a lot of people were let down by SF5. And it felt like they knew it. And that's the one thing I can say about like the redemption arc that Street Fighter sort of goes through here. It goes from taking SF to possibly the lowest point it's ever been, comparable to New Generation, I'd say. Probably even more because of the internet. And bringing it back to something that is genuinely an interesting fighting game, giving characters all these interesting tools. They added the V-shift mechanic. I forgot about that, just to spice things up a bit, right? To make neutral a little more interesting. They added V-shift so that you get this invincible backdash type stuff, and it looks super cool. It actually is a really neat mechanic. You can't do it all the time, but it is a neat mechanic. And then eventually you get, obviously, you know, different V skills, different V triggers. There's a lot of variance here. So this is a huge improvement. And Street Fighter V does go on to eventually sell pretty damn well for Capcom. However, that first year, it didn't come close to meeting sales expectations. And, you know, I held kind of a little bit of ill will towards Street Fighter V, especially after that beginning. And I really wished that other Capcom fighting games would have gotten the attention that Street Fighter V got, even if it was doing as bad as it did. Other fighting games around the time that were plagued with just as many problems, like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, in different ways, would not get the love, care, and attention that Street Fighter V would get, which bugs me. Everything that's happening around Capcom fighting games in this time frame, in the mid, like, 2010s, is not instilling me with a ton of confidence. As soon as that Season 4 to Season 5 of Street Fighter happened, everything changed. And it really felt like, oh, shit is changing. We're really... This game is turning into something pretty cool, and it seems like everything is kind of making a 180 in terms of making fans happy. And that brings us to today, potentially like a day before the release of Street Fighter 6, with an absolute insane Metacritic as of right now, and seemingly is the most feature-rich fighting game that we have actually ever seen. A fighting game that is taken all the stuff that we've been bitching and complaining about, all these small individual things. We're like, dude, how is this not standard in fighting games, man? How do we just not have this? How can we not have that? How can we just not have a story mode that teaches you how to play? These things that I've been complaining about for years. And seemingly Street Fighter 6 is doing all of it. It's like they were listening the whole time. They knew that they could do something, but 5 was not the game that they were able to execute all those ideas on. It was going to be the next game. It was going to be Street Fighter 6. And luckily, now that the reviews are out, we can let out a sigh of relief. We're back, baby.
Street Fighter 6.
I'm fucking tired. Shit, my story's over, chat. I'm fucking tired. Shit. It's like 6. The end.